Last year's CitizenCon wasn't just another presentation. It was really a statement. CIG showed us a game that finally felt like it was finding its footing. And for the first time in a long time, Star Citizen looked real. From the in-depth dive to base building and crafting to that amazing Squadron demo, 2954 gave us more than just promises. It gave us progress. But as we get ready for CitizenCon 2955, it's time to look back at what CIG actually delivered, what fell flat, and what it all means for the year ahead. I'm Citizen Chaos, and this is your full CitizenCon recap from last year. So day one of CitizenCon 2954 last year started out really strong with a deep dive on the more technical side into the Genesis game engine. What this is it's really an explanation of exactly how they plan to create so many vast planets that they have in the star system. And essentially, just to break it down and really summarize it, what they were saying is that every single asset within the game will have a series of attributes, right from the planet itself, the different areas of the planet, to each individual tree. So the idea being that the nature will actually render itself by looking at saying, okay, on this place, on this planet, at this time of year, these are the most likely plants to actually grow. Now, if this plant is growing, what's actually likely to grow next to it? Now, this is really fundamental by looking at things like the geology, the soil type, the humidity, the soil depth, and really, etc., quite honestly, because there's a lot more attributes that are coming into this. It allows them to generate lifelike planets that no designer ever needs to physically touch. There's no way that this game can scale to the size that it needs to without providing this ability. But this is really fundamental for the remainder of the presentations all the way through day one and actually even into day two of CitizenCon last year. So it's a fundamental concept that we really needed to understand before we really moved on. Now they go on to say how they're going to introduce seasons into the different planets within the game and how the vegetation is going to respond accordingly. So maybe certain vegetation doesn't spawn during the winter, that kind of thing. And how every single plant also needs to be physics-based. So as you walk through a jungle, for instance, the leaves will have to mold around you. This is going to look incredibly good once it's actually done. The next section of the presentation really dove into how they plan to populate each of the different worlds. So using the same structure and database that they had within the first section, and again, that'll continue through all the other sections, they plan to basically create different structures. Now, their goal is to have at least something for you to discover every 100 kilometers on every single planet within the game. Now, the only way that they can make that happen, I mean, obviously you can't do that manually. The only way to make that happen is to actually make the assets modular. And instead of defining how an entire settlement looks, they actually define the information on a building or an asset basis, and then allow the engine to generate those different assets together to make different settlements. They also went into how they plan to group each settlement. So you will have a settlement, like, let's say, for instance, near a distribution center, you might find a bunch of mining outposts, and then near those mining outposts, you'll actually find caves that all have similar harvestables for each of the different mining outposts. This will make the game feel realistic in the sense that you won't have a mining outpost way out in the middle of nowhere with no reason for it to ever actually be there. They also really dove into how each of those settlements will be designed or will be brought into clusters, and each of those clusters are going to be grouped into sectors. And each of them are going to have their own kind of data and persona. And each of those sectors can be populated around the world. So you may end up with 20 different sectors, resulting in thousands of POI within a world. But anytime you're within a given sector, it's going to have its own kind of personality. The same way that you would find a group of small cities to have their own personality within a province or a state. They then moved into how they're going to have the NPCs interact with such a dynamic world. And this talk also talked about the day and night cycle and how an NPC is going to have to use light to really perceive what's happening where. And for instance, if you are hiding in a stealthy place, the NPC might not be able to find you during the nighttime, but you might actually be in broad daylight in the middle of the day. They'd have no problem actually finding you. This is a nice segue into Maelstrom, and the dynamic destruction that the environment is going to have, and really how they plan to have the NPCs react to the destruction as it happens. They then moved into light, and Cole's notes on this one is essentially it's a series of grids that allow them to calculate the light level at any given specific area. Now, they also talked a bit about how they had to deal with reflections. Now, those bring in their own set of complexities, of course. And what this allows is that it allows the artist to actually work light more naturally into an environment and utilize the normal day-night cycle. Whereas today, the artists are kind of placing lights and lanterns in places they might not otherwise naturally be, just to allow the player to actually see things within the world. After light, they moved into how sounds are going to be made a lot more realistic, and how sound will actually adapt to the environment that you're in. So for instance, if you're within a ship, you're going to hear things slightly differently now than if you were outside within the vast space. Now, they are going to kind of bend some physics rules here in the sense that you're still going to be able to hear gunfire within space, but it'll sound more muffled if you're on the inside of a ship, for instance, or the other side of a wall. Finally, within this presentation, they moved into nature's wrath and the weather elements of how they plan to populate the world. Now, this covered everything from the cloud improvements to weather systems to lightnings to how the water is going to pool on the ground when it's raining, but yet dry up and the rocks will turn a different color when they're wet versus when they're dry. This also brought into consideration how ships are going to react to the weather through things like turbulence. And in the demo, they actually have lightning taking down a ship as it's flying. You're going to start to see damage caused by the weather, which is really a dynamic event within the world. And here we are a year later, and we've seen a lot of the stuff that they talked about already being worked into the game. I think some of it we actually see and notice a lot more than others, which might kind of be seen as background. Not necessarily big, bold changes that happen, but little tiny improvements that they're making over time. There are some very obvious things like weather systems that they've started to bring into the world. Now, it's not the full, complete version that we plan to have in the future, maybe for release 1.0, maybe before, but it is definitely working into the right direction. And I do think a lot of the stuff that they've covered off here is already being brought into the game. Maybe not completely, but definitely in some aspect of it. Next up, they moved into a presentation called the Social Universe. And really what this was about was it was about describing how Star Citizen is going to move their social aspects forward in the future. It starts out by describing what Star Citizen is and how it's not really a single-sided game. It's not PvE, it's not PvP, it's really both. And the significance of Star Citizen is the fact that both of those live in harmony with one another. Now, they did talk about a brand new social app, which is going to bring a lot of the social communications into it within the mobiGlass. They talked about how the synchronization is going to happen with Spectrum. So you're not necessarily going to have to be in the game, but you can actually benefit from a lot of the communications that happen if you are, say, at work on the website. It came out pretty strong in this presentation, showing off a very nice UI with a lot of enhanced party functionality, right down to the point that you'll be able to see when a party mate is within a ship and even the given seat that they're sitting in. So you'll be able to tell who's the pilot, the co-pilot, etc. We're also going to bring in a party finder, an introduction of a blocked list, so those people you don't want to talk to that constantly advertise their org, yeah, you can just block them now. Or you will be able to anyways. This looks really good, but unfortunately we haven't actually seen any of it in the game yet. And then they moved into FOIP and VOIP, VoIP and VoIP. Now what this is it's essentially using any webcam to show how a person's face talks. Now this is in the game and has been in the game for quite a while, but they're constantly doing improvements to it, such as head rotation and really changing the range of the motion of the mouth itself. So I do believe a lot of these enhancements have actually been brought into the game already, but I'm sure that they're continuing to work on them as they go through. Next up, we've got the guide system and the beacons. Now, they're basically going to have a completely new guide system and beacons. Right now, it's really just on Spectrum on the website. There's no real trust to who you're talking to, and I think a lot of people game it as it is right now. Once they bring it into the game, they're actually going to be introducing requirements. Not just anybody can file to be a guide, like you can today. Becoming a guide will actually have its own set of list of things that you need to achieve in order to become the guide in a specific area. Once you've achieved those things, then you can opt into being a guide. Now, being a guide will also provide you rewards. Now, the rewards may be through your guild, they may be through your org, etc., but you'll essentially be paid for being a guide, for lack of better words. Along with that, they're going to be introducing the beacons and the trust / service rating system. This allows you to create a beacon anytime that you need help and really trust the person who's going to come to help you. But also, the person who's coming to help you will be able to trust and see how your previous interactions actually kind of ended. This allows kind of a mutual trust so that you don't get people just abusing the system, try and bring in potential victims to essentially rob them. As I'm sure you know, we really haven't seen any of these changes over the past year. In fact, the guides in the beacon system is largely unchanged, and the beacon system just got brought back in the latest release, I hear. Although I haven't actually been able to find it myself. The next section, they moved on to orgs, and really talked about the fact that the orgs are going to be brought into the game. Whereas right now, they don't really offer a lot of purpose in the game. It's really just kind of outside of the game, normally through Discord, quite honestly. So there's going to be a brand new org app that they're introducing that's going to allow you to search for a new org and really kind of see a lot of the details that you can see on the website before you join it. You'll also be able to join the org from directly within the game, kind of like you'd just honestly expect. Now, they're also going to have several tabs in there for things that most Discord servers I've been on have, like an events calendar, announcements. They're also going to include an events log, so you'll be able to actually see what the other org members that you have actually been up to. So if somebody crafts a gun, for instance, you'll be able to see that that person crafted a gun. That would be useful when it comes to actually crafting and selling things. Now, they're also going to give you the ability to represent one org at a time, but actually join multiple. This would be handy if you're in an org that doesn't support piracy, but you still want to be a pirate sometimes. And you can kind of hide the fact that you're part of the other orgs while you're being a pirate. Now, to help support that, they're going to introduce things like tags on your gamer name so that you can actually see who is part of which org when. And it really gives a lot of tools for the org leader to kind of help out his org by doing and setting a lot of this stuff up. Now, speaking of org leader, kind of at that more management level of the org, you're actually going to have relationships between orgs identified within game and then propagated down into the player. You'll be able to see who is a part of a friendly org. You'll be able to see who is part of an enemy org, for instance. All of that information will be brought in and readily available to you just when you look at the person's gamer tag. Now, they're also going to be bringing in loyalty, and your loyalty to a organization is going to basically determine the rewards that you get from that organization. So the more loyal that you are, the better rewards that you get. This is going to be incredibly interesting when they introduce it, but again, a lot of the stuff that we've seen in this entire video, we haven't seen brought into the game yet as of this year. Next up, we have a presentation entitled Dress to Kill. This was the shortest presentation to date within the CitizenCon when it happened. It was only about 34 minutes long. What this presentation really talked about was how all of the armor and the clothing that you're going to be purchasing or acquiring are going to have a series of attributes assigned to them, allowing them to kind of make certain areas of gameplay a lot easier. So for instance, you may have some armor that's specialized for a sniper. That's going to have different attributes to it, which allow you to scan easier, for instance. Maybe you're a lot stealthier, for instance. Whereas if you have some super heavy-duty tank-like armor for you to wear yourself, that may not be as stealthy. I mean, those are pretty obvious, but when you start to talk about different hats that you wear and the shoes and things like that, there's a lot that can actually dive into this. And it's also going to, when they introduce the full Starwear capability, give you the ability to mix armor and clothing, which is going to give people a lot more personalized look. Whereas today, you kind of wear an undersuit or a shirt. You can't really mix and match them today. Now, furthering into the specialized equipment, they actually dove into a lot of different examples, like a flight suit might be a lot better at flying and EVAing, whereas your heavy armor, again, is probably not going to be good at EVA, and you're actually going to be restricted in your flight. You're probably also not going to be able to wear a backpack and a gun while you're sitting in the pilot seat. All of that is coming, was talked about in the first part of the Dress to Kill presentation. Next up, they actually moved on to the mighty Apex, the Valakar. These are the tremor-like monsters that I'm sure you've seen people in their videos have already. And we don't actually have the version that they showed, but we do have an irradiated version in Pyro. So we're moving in the right direction at least. They've also talked about how they're going to have different variants of each creature. Now, the irradiated would technically be one of those variants, but they may introduce a jungle or a cave version, or the sky's really the limit once they start to build in some of these base creatures. Now, it's really nice to see them making progress this year with these creatures, and it's really nice to see the verse being a little bit more populated. I know it's kind of strange to fly through the desert and see a worm pop up, but it's a lot better than before when there was just nothing. Next up was a presentation entitled Beyond Pyro, and they really broke down what the next systems are going to be and exactly what's going to happen after they release Pyro. Remember, at this time they hadn't released it yet. So the next system they introduced was Nyx. Now, this will be comprised of several different planets, but also the Levski space station, which I guess had previously been in the game in some form. I'd never actually had the opportunity to see it, but a lot of people are really excited about it. And if I had to oversimplify what it is, I would say that it's a giant asteroid that had been mined all the way through, but people actually live within the asteroid itself. Now, it's definitely seen a bunch of updates since the last time that they showed it. So they have docking collars, extra large hangars, exterior freight hangars, etc. Now, this is the first time within this presentation anyways. The presentation is the first time that they've shown the Hull C actually being manually loaded. So with those exterior freight elevators, you'll actually be able to load, and you'll have to load your Hull C manually. No more magic cargo. Now, this will be the next system up after Pyro. So we'll see what actually is announced at CitizenCon this year. Next up, they dove into how they're going to be introducing a lot more gameplay within the landing zones. Now, the example they gave was at Area 18. They call it the Municipal Works Area. Now, essentially what this is it's two different areas, and it's really an open world sandbox area and an instanced area. So some areas will be publicly accessible and others need to be kind of unlocked as you go through and you make progress. This is very similar to the contested zones in regards to kind of exploration, repair, pest controlling. And the instance areas are going to give you the ability to kind of work through a series of puzzles, maybe by yourself, maybe with a group. And the further through that you get, the more that unlocks. You might unlock level 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. And you're going to have to solve more and more complex puzzles as you kind of go through. Now, this will all be highly curated content with very high level loot, and it's all progression based. But you're not going to have to deal with the PvP aspect because it's actually done in instanced areas. It's like your hangar. No one else is going to be able to access it. Next up, they moved into talking about the future solar systems. They talked about how we have Stanton at the time they were coming up with Pyro. Nyx will be next, and then finally, the fourth system they'll be launching is Castra. Now, Castra consists of two different planets, one they call Bullseye, one they call Cascomb, and it looks like it's going to be a great expansion to the verse whenever it happens to actually come in. Now, this is still probably a couple years away, my guess, so who knows how much it'll actually change by the time we see it, but what they showed looked amazing. Now, they ended off this presentation really talking about Sherman, which is one of the new cities within the new systems that are going to be actually brought into the game. Now, they said it's currently in pre-production, but I don't know if it actually still is. It's a very interesting watch if you actually want to go through it. I'm not going to dive into too much detail, but essentially it gives you localized gameplay with a bunch of shops and hangars, and really it's just another landing zone for you to go and explore. Now, day one ended on a huge note with a demo of Squadron 42. Now, Rich Tyler came on stage, showed off the game, which really worked through the prologue of the game, and it looked amazing. I had not actually watched the full demo until doing this video or preparing for this video, and there's a lot of things in that video that actually get me very excited about the game. The game I didn't really care about until I watched that video, so it clearly does its job very well. Now, the demo didn't go perfectly. There was some screen tearing due to the way that the systems were set up, I guess, in the conference place they were in. What they say anyways. I guess Rich Tyler actually went back that night and re-recorded an entire new demo that they uploaded. Now, as you watch through this video of the demo, of course, there's a lot of functionality in there where you recognize Star Citizen, but it's kind of like, hey, why can't we have that now? And it looked very polished. Now I realize it was just the prologue. There's probably dozens of missions that needed to happen and dozen of chapters or whatever they want to call them in the game. But it is very exciting, and I can't wait to see this game hopefully coming out next year. And that's really the recap for day one. This was just the first day. There's a lot of stuff that was actually captured on day two. I'm going to split this up into two different videos just so that it's not an hour-long video. I'm going to be doing the recap for day two, probably releasing it tomorrow. So make sure that you subscribe so that you get a copy of that video when it actually comes out. I'm Citizen Chaos, and I'll see you in the verse. And tomorrow.